If you want to know the exact moment an entire galaxy realized it had misunderstood humanity, do not begin with the arrival of a royal fleet. Begin with one forgotten lunch tray. My name is Archivist Sorrel, and I have preserved the records of emperors, legendary explorers, and civilizations that rose among the stars. Yet none of those stories has been requested more often than the afternoon a quiet human named Ethan Walker walked into the Grand Stellar Academy, carrying nothing more extraordinary than a simple meal. At that time, humans were still viewed with cautious curiosity by many species. They were considered adaptable, stubborn, and strangely optimistic, but certainly not influential enough to change interstellar history through ordinary kindness. That assumption would not survive the next hour. The Academy cafeteria stretched across nearly 200 feet beneath a transparent crystal dome where distant stars shimmered above hundreds of students representing dozens of civilizations. Laughter echoed between polished walls as conversations flowed from table to table, yet one corner remained completely silent. Sitting alone was a young alien girl with pale blue skin wearing the spotless white uniform reserved for the Academy's highest-ranking scholars. No one approached her. Some students glanced toward her before quietly choosing another table. Others deliberately turned away as though an invisible barrier surrounded her seat. Ethan noticed the pattern almost immediately. He balanced his lunch tray for a moment, looked around the crowded cafeteria, then walked directly toward the empty chair across from the lonely girl. Several nearby students stopped speaking. One whispered, "He does not know who she is." Another quietly laughed. "He is about to learn." Ethan simply smiled as he sat down. "Mind if I join you?" The young alien hesitated before answering in an almost uncertain voice. "You are asking me?" Ethan looked around the empty table. "Unless someone invisible is sitting here." For the first time that afternoon, the girl smiled. It was small, hesitant, and genuine. Ethan placed his tray between them and noticed her untouched meal. Not very hungry. She looked down at the table. "I forgot to eat." Ethan studied the oversized sandwich on his plate for only a second before cutting it in half and sliding one piece toward her. "Then today you do not have to remember alone." She stared at the sandwich as though no one had ever offered her something so ordinary. Around them, whispers spread through the cafeteria faster than a transmission signal. Students began standing from their seats. Some quietly activated personal communicators. Others watched with open disbelief. Ethan remained completely unaware. He asked where she was from, whether she liked the academy, and which classes she enjoyed most. She answered carefully at first, then more naturally with every passing minute, until soft laughter replaced the silence that had surrounded her all semester. Across the cafeteria, several instructors exchanged puzzled looks because they had spent months trying to help the mysterious girl feel accepted without success. Ethan accomplished it before finishing half his lunch. Then everything changed. A deep ceremonial tone echoed through the academy. Every conversation stopped instantly. Outside the crystal dome, dozens of brilliant lights appeared across the afternoon sky. Sleek royal starships descended in perfect formation, their silver hulls reflecting sunlight as they surrounded the academy with breathtaking precision. Students rushed toward the observation windows in stunned silence, while instructors froze where they stood. Ethan finally looked outside and quietly asked, "Is something important happening today?" The young alien accepted the final bite of the sandwich with grateful eyes before softly answering, "Yes. My grandmother came to thank the person who shared lunch with me." At that exact moment, every ship lowered the same royal crest across its hull, and the entire cafeteria suddenly understood they were not witnessing an ordinary visit. They were watching the arrival of the most powerful ruler in known space. The silence inside the Grand Stellar Academy cafeteria lasted only a few seconds before it exploded into nervous whispers. Students abandoned their meals and crowded around the enormous crystal windows, watching dozens of silver royal starships descend with flawless precision until they surrounded the campus from every direction. Faculty members immediately activated emergency diplomatic procedures, while Academy officials hurried through the corridors preparing for a reception that had never been scheduled. Ethan Walker remained seated, glancing from the breathtaking display outside back to the young alien girl beside him. "Your grandmother must be pretty important," he said with an easy smile. The girl looked at him almost apologetically before quietly answering, She governs every world in our alliance. Ethan blinked once. Well, that explains the impressive parking job. Despite the tension filling the cafeteria, the young alien could not help smiling again. Around them, however, nobody else found the moment amusing. Several students stared at Ethan as though he had unknowingly stepped into the center of the most dangerous social mistake imaginable. One whispered that no ordinary student had ever spoken so casually with the future ruler of the Alliance. Another insisted the human had probably been planning this encounter from the beginning. Their assumptions spread faster than facts, and within moments Ethan had become the subject of hundreds of conflicting stories. Then the main entrance opened. A formation of ceremonial royal guards entered with calm discipline, their polished white armor reflecting the afternoon light, while elegant blue cloaks flowed behind them. Unlike soldiers preparing for conflict, every movement displayed quiet dignity and absolute confidence. The cafeteria instantly became silent again. The commanding officer slowly approached Ethan and the young princess before respectfully bowing toward her. "Your Highness, Her Majesty will arrive shortly. Are you unharmed?" The princess nodded. "I am perfectly well." The officer then turned toward Ethan. Every nearby student expected accusations or harsh questioning. Instead, the guard simply asked, "Human, may we know your name?" "Ethan Walker," he answered calmly. "Thank you, Mr. Walker." The officer replied with surprising courtesy. "Would you please remain here until Her Majesty arrives?" Ethan shrugged lightly. "I was not planning to leave anyway." The officer inclined his head before stepping back. The unexpected respect shown toward the human only fueled the confusion spreading through the room. A senior academy instructor hurried over, clearly anxious. "Mr. Walker, do you understand who you have been speaking with?" Ethan nodded toward the young girl. Someone who looked like she could use company during lunch. The instructor sighed. "She is the granddaughter of High Queen Seraphis." Ethan looked at the princess, then quietly replied, "She still looked like she could use company." Those simple words left the instructor without an answer. Minutes later, academy administrators arrived alongside diplomats and department leaders, all preparing elaborate greetings for the approaching monarch. Yet while officials rehearsed formal introductions, Ethan noticed the princess had never finished the second half of the sandwich. "You should probably eat before everyone gets busy," he said, sliding the remaining food toward her. She accepted it with genuine gratitude. Watching from the upper gallery, I realized something none of the officials had yet understood. Every important figure entering the cafeteria focused first on the royal bloodline. Ethan remained the only person still paying attention to the child. Suddenly, the ceremonial doors at the far end of the academy began opening one after another. Bright afternoon light poured across the polished floor as a path formed through the silent crowd. Outside, every royal starship lowered its banners in perfect unison. Then the academy loudspeakers announced the arrival of High Queen Seraphis, and every alien in the room instinctively bowed, while Ethan quietly stood beside the princess, still wondering why sharing half of a sandwich had somehow brought the most powerful woman in the galaxy to his lunch table. High Queen Seraphis entered the Grand Stellar Academy with the quiet confidence of someone who had never needed to announce her authority. Every royal guard stepped aside as she crossed the cafeteria, her flowing white robes moving gracefully across the polished floor while every student and instructor remained respectfully bowed. The only sounds came from the distant hum of the academy and the gentle footsteps of the monarch herself. Ethan Walker stood calmly beside the young princess, uncertain of the proper customs but determined to remain respectful. He lowered his head with quiet courtesy, treating the queen exactly as he would any honored elder. I watched carefully from the archive balcony because I had witnessed countless rulers enter this academy before, yet never had one ignored every official waiting to greet her. High Queen Seraphis walked past academy directors, distinguished ambassadors, decorated military officers, and members of the Royal Council without acknowledging a single one of them. Her attention remained fixed entirely upon the human. When she finally stopped only a few feet away, the cafeteria became so silent that even nervous breathing seemed unusually loud. Everyone expected a formal investigation or a stern warning. Instead, the queen looked toward her granddaughter, whose expression had become brighter than I had ever recorded inside the academy archives. "Did you enjoy your lunch?" she asked gently. The young princess smiled. "Very much, grandmother." The queen nodded once before turning toward Ethan. Was she alone when you found her? Ethan answered honestly. Yes, Your Majesty. And why did you choose to sit beside her? The question echoed through the room. Royal advisors quietly watched the human, convinced this was some carefully designed examination. Ethan thought for only a moment before answering. Because nobody should have to eat lunch by themselves if there is an empty chair beside them. Several members of the Royal Council exchanged skeptical glances. One senior advisor stepped forward with obvious concern. Your Majesty, permission to question the human. The Queen gave a slight nod. The advisor faced Ethan with a measured expression. Did you know the identity of the student before approaching her? No. Did you hope to gain influence with the royal family? No. Did you expect any reward? Ethan smiled politely. I expected to finish my sandwich. Quiet laughter spread among several younger students before quickly fading beneath the advisor's serious stare. Refusing to surrender, the advisor continued. Human, every action creates an objective. What objective motivated yours? Ethan looked toward the young princess before quietly replying. She looked lonely. I wanted her to feel less lonely. That was the entire objective. The advisor opened his mouth to continue, but found no immediate response. High Queen Seraphis slowly stepped closer until she stood directly before Ethan. Her calm eyes studied him for several long seconds. Then she asked a single question that none of us expected. If you had known she was my granddaughter before sharing your meal, would you have behaved differently? Every person in the cafeteria waited for the answer. Ethan looked at the princess, then back at the queen, before speaking with complete sincerity. Yes, Your Majesty. I would have packed a larger lunch because she still looked hungry. Absolute silence followed. Even the royal council appeared stunned. Then, for the first time in many years, High Queen Seraphis smiled openly before the entire academy. It was not the controlled diplomatic smile recorded during official ceremonies. It was warm, genuine, and unmistakably proud. Behind her, several council members quietly lowered their eyes because they finally understood the human had defeated every test they had prepared without realizing he had been tested at all. Yet before anyone could celebrate the extraordinary moment, the massive entrance doors opened once again as a towering royal champion in ceremonial armor stepped into the cafeteria, respectfully bowed before the queen, and requested permission to challenge the human in honorable combat so the entire academy could discover whether humanity possessed more than kindness alone. The request echoed across the cafeteria like the opening move of a contest everyone had secretly wanted to witness. The towering royal champion remained perfectly still after presenting the challenge, his polished ceremonial armor reflecting the light pouring through the academy dome, while every student waited for High Queen Seraphis to respond. Ethan Walker looked from the champion to the queen with visible curiosity rather than concern. May I ask what kind of honorable combat this is? He said calmly. The champion answered before the queen could speak. A contest of discipline, awareness, and controlled skill. No one will be harmed. The purpose is to measure character under pressure, not to cause injury. Ethan nodded once. That sounds reasonable. Several members of the Royal Council seemed surprised that the human accepted without hesitation. They had expected uncertainty from someone facing the most respected guardian of the royal household. Instead, Ethan quietly placed his empty lunch tray on the nearest table and followed the champion toward the academy's ceremonial training arena. Within minutes, thousands of students filled the observation galleries surrounding the circular platform that stretched nearly 100 feet across beneath a transparent ceiling. Faculty members, ambassadors, and royal advisors occupied the upper balconies while Princess Lyra stood beside her grandmother, her hands folded together with quiet anticipation rather than fear. I took my place within the archive gallery overlooking the arena because I sensed another lesson was about to enter the historical record. The royal champion stepped onto the polished platform and respectfully bowed toward Ethan. Ethan immediately returned the gesture with equal respect. That simple action caused several experienced instructors to exchange approving glances. The human had not entered the arena with arrogance. He had entered as though meeting an equal. A senior referee activated the training field, surrounding the platform with a soft energy boundary designed only to mark the competition area. Victory shall be awarded to the participant demonstrating superior control, judgment, and adaptability, the referee announced. The match begins now. The champion moved first with remarkable speed, circling Ethan in smooth, measured steps while searching for an opening. Ethan did not chase him. He remained relaxed, observing every movement with steady attention. Murmurs spread through the audience as the champion changed direction several times, testing the human. From different angles, Ethan quietly adjusted his footing each time without appearing rushed. "He is reading the pattern," one academy instructor whispered. Suddenly, the champion accelerated into a rapid sequence of controlled practice maneuvers intended to force Ethan into making an early mistake. Instead of reacting impulsively, Ethan calmly shifted aside with precise timing, allowing each movement to pass harmlessly before creating space again. The audience fell silent. There was no panic on the human's face, only concentration. The champion increased the pace once more, combining speed with unexpected changes in rhythm. Ethan watched carefully for another moment before smiling slightly. "You favor your right side before every transition," he observed. The champion paused for the briefest instant, surprised that the human had recognized the pattern so quickly. Ethan then mirrored the same sequence with clean, disciplined precision, matching every movement while maintaining complete balance. Even the Academy's combat instructors leaned forward in astonishment. High Queen Seraphis noticed the expression on the champion's face before anyone else. For the first time during the contest, he was no longer evaluating the human. He was learning from him. The exchange continued for several more measured moments until the champion voluntarily stepped back, lowered his hands, and respectfully bowed. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying across the arena. "The human has demonstrated greater adaptability than I anticipated. I acknowledge his victory." A wave of astonished silence swept through the academy before applause erupted from every level of the arena. Ethan blinked in surprise. "That was it?" he asked with an embarrassed smile. The champion nodded respectfully. "The strongest competitors are not those who overpower others. They are those who understand them first." Yet while the applause continued, one member of the Royal Council quietly rose from his seat with an expression that suggested the human had passed only the first challenge, and that a far more difficult test was already being prepared. The applause inside the Grand Stellar Academy had barely begun to fade when the atmosphere changed once again. The Royal Council member who had quietly risen from his seat stepped toward the center of the arena with measured confidence, carrying a polished crystal sphere that immediately drew the attention of every instructor and ambassador present. Unlike the previous contest, this challenge had nothing to do with movement alone. It was a trial reserved for future commanders, diplomats, and rulers. High Queen Seraphis watched without interruption, allowing events to unfold naturally. Ethan Walker stood patiently near the center of the platform, still looking more like an ordinary student than someone who had already surprised the entire academy twice in one afternoon. The counselor raised the crystal sphere until it floated gently above his hand. "Human," he announced, "our greatest victories have never belonged to the strongest individual. They belong to those capable of making impossible decisions under impossible pressure. If humanity truly possesses uncommon wisdom, then demonstrate it now." The crystal expanded into a lifelike holographic simulation visible throughout the arena. A large research station appeared suspended above a distant world, while dozens of civilian transport vessels drifted nearby. Moments later, an unexpected solar disturbance emerged on the display, forcing every ship into rapidly changing flight paths. The simulation generated hundreds of possible outcomes, each demanding immediate judgment. "You may issue only 3 commands," the counselor explained. "Every command saves one group, while placing another at greater risk. Choose wisely." Murmurs spread through the audience. Many academy graduates had failed this examination because every available solution required sacrifice. Ethan studied the projection without speaking. Instead of rushing toward the controls, he quietly observed how the simulated vessels moved together. Nearly a full minute passed before he finally asked a question. "Who designed this scenario?" The counselor appeared slightly confused. "The Royal Strategic Academy." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Then it was designed by people expecting someone to choose between the groups." The counselor folded his hands. "Naturally, resources are limited." Ethan looked back toward the projection. "Only if I accept the rules exactly as they were presented." Several professors immediately leaned forward. Ethan requested permission to adjust the simulation timeline by only 20 seconds before issuing his first command. The counselor hesitated before agreeing. Ethan then redirected a series of automated maintenance drones that had previously been ignored because they were considered insignificant. Working together, the drones repositioned navigation beacons that altered the approach angles of every transport vessel. His second command synchronized emergency communications between ships that had originally been isolated from one another. His final command instructed the research station to temporarily release stored propulsion reserves into a shared guidance network instead of protecting only itself. Within seconds, the simulation recalculated every possible outcome. One by one, the warning indicators disappeared until every civilian transport escaped the disturbance safely, while the research station remained fully operational. Complete silence filled the arena. The counselor slowly examined the final results several times before lowering his hands. "You were never supposed to save everyone," he admitted quietly. Ethan smiled with gentle humility. "Then maybe the exercise has been asking the wrong question." A wave of astonishment spread through the observation galleries. Experienced strategists who had studied the simulation for years stared at the human in disbelief because none of them had challenged the assumptions built into the test itself. High Queen Seraphis looked toward the Royal Council with calm satisfaction. "Humanity does not merely solve problems," she said. "They often begin by asking whether the problem was correctly defined." Even the royal champion who had faced Ethan earlier inclined his head with sincere respect. Yet before the realization could settle across the academy, emergency signals suddenly echoed from the orbital command center. A massive, unidentified vessel had entered the system without transmitting hostile intent or diplomatic clearance, and every sensor aboard the Academy reported that its destination was the humans standing quietly in the middle of the arena. The emergency alarms echoed through every level of the Grand Stellar Academy, replacing the excitement of the recent challenge with complete uncertainty. Students hurried toward the observation galleries while instructors activated the enormous holographic display suspended above the central arena. A single vessel appeared at the edge of the system, larger than any diplomatic ship currently orbiting the Academy. Unlike the elegant royal fleet of High Queen Seraphis, this craft carried no recognizable alliance markings. Its smooth silver surface reflected the surrounding stars, and every long-range scanner returned the same puzzling result. The vessel possessed extraordinary technology, yet it transmitted no threat, no demand, and no official request for entry. The only message repeated across every communication channel contained 7 simple words. "We have come to meet Ethan Walker." A wave of astonishment spread through the arena. Royal advisors immediately exchanged concerned whispers while Academy officials searched every diplomatic archive for information about the unidentified visitors. Nothing matched. High Queen Seraphis remained remarkably composed. She looked toward Ethan with calm curiosity instead of concern. "Have you ever seen this vessel before?" Ethan studied the projection for several seconds before quietly shaking his head. "No, Your Majesty. I have absolutely no idea who they are." His honest confusion only deepened the mystery. The Royal Council quickly formed around the Queen. One advisor insisted the Academy should deny the request until every possible risk had been evaluated. Another recommended relocating Ethan to a secure facility. A third argued that no unknown civilization should be permitted near the future royal heir. While the debate intensified, Princess Lyra noticed Ethan watching the discussion with thoughtful eyes instead of fear. "Are you worried?" she asked softly. Ethan smiled. "Not really. Whoever traveled this far probably has a reason, and I would rather hear it." Before assuming the worst, several nearby officers looked surprised by the answer. High Queen Seraphis slowly nodded. A conclusion should never arrive before understanding. She then addressed the command center. "Grant the vessel permission to approach under standard diplomatic observation." Moments later, the unidentified craft descended gracefully into the Academy landing complex without triggering a single defensive response. There were no escort fighters, no military formations, and no displays of intimidation. The enormous landing platform became perfectly still as the ship's entrance opened with quiet precision. A single elderly alien stepped onto the platform wearing plain gray robes instead of ceremonial clothing. He carried no visible symbol of authority and walked with the relaxed pace of a respected teacher rather than an ambitious leader. Every sensor confirmed the same surprising fact. He had arrived alone. The Queen, the Royal Council, Ethan, and Princess Lyra gathered near the landing area while hundreds of students watched from a respectful distance. The elderly visitor stopped several feet from Ethan before offering a courteous bow. "Human," he said warmly. "Thank you for proving that our oldest prediction was correct." Ethan blinked in confusion. "I think you have the wrong person." The visitor smiled kindly. "On the contrary, for generations, our scholars believed that humanity's greatest strength would never be physical power or advanced technology. We believed it would be the remarkable habit of solving conflicts before they became battles." Complete silence settled across the landing platform. Even the Royal Council appeared captivated. The visitor continued. "Today you defeated a champion without humiliation, solved an impossible trial without sacrifice, and earned the trust of a future queen without asking for anything in return." Every report we received confirmed the same conclusion. He looked directly at High Queen Seraphis before finishing his sentence. "Your Majesty, you are not witnessing an extraordinary human. You are witnessing an ordinary human behaving exactly as humanity hoped future generations would behave." For the first time that day, the Queen lowered her head in thoughtful reflection, because she realized the greatest revelation had never been about Ethan Walker alone. It was about an entire civilization whose quiet values had remained hidden behind simple kindness until the galaxy had finally learned to see them. The elderly visitor's words lingered over the Grand Stellar Academy long after the landing platform had grown quiet. No one rushed to answer because every student, instructor, diplomat, and royal advisor understood they had just witnessed something far more significant than another successful examination. They had watched an outsider describe humanity with greater confidence than many humans described themselves. Ethan Walker looked genuinely uncomfortable with the attention. He rubbed the back of his neck before smiling politely. "I think you are giving me far too much credit." The elderly visitor chuckled softly. "That response is precisely why our scholars searched for someone like you." Several members of the Royal Council exchanged puzzled looks. One senior advisor finally stepped forward. "You speak as though this meeting was planned long before today." The visitor nodded. It was. A wave of quiet surprise spread through the gathering. High Queen Seraphis remained composed as she asked, "Explain." The visitor folded his hands calmly. "Many years ago, our historians noticed a remarkable pattern whenever humans entered unfamiliar civilizations. The first stories were rarely about military victories, technological superiority, or political influence. They were almost always about one ordinary human helping someone without expecting recognition." The advisor frowned. "Coincidence does not create history." "No," the visitor replied gently. "Repeated choices create history." He activated a small holographic projector, revealing dozens of archived moments collected from distant worlds. In every recording, an ordinary human was solving disagreements, helping strangers, teaching children, repairing damaged equipment, or quietly standing beside someone everyone else ignored. None of the humans appeared famous. None held extraordinary authority. Yet every recording ended with stronger communities than those that existed before the human arrived. Murmurs spread across the platform as ambassadors recognized events from their own civilizations. Ethan watched the projection with the same curiosity as everyone else. "I never knew about any of this," he admitted. "Most humans do not," the visitor answered. "They simply continue living according to the values they were taught." Princess Lyra looked thoughtfully toward Ethan. "So you were never trying to become a hero?" Ethan laughed quietly. "I was mostly trying to finish lunch before my afternoon class." Even High Queen Seraphis smiled at the answer. The visitor turned toward the Queen once more. "Your Majesty, you asked earlier why your granddaughter trusted this human so quickly. The answer is simpler than politics. She recognized sincerity before anyone else did." The Queen slowly nodded. "And the rest of us spent the day testing what required no test." The Royal Council fell silent. For the first time since the royal fleet had arrived, several advisors lowered their heads with quiet humility. One of them finally addressed Ethan directly. "Human, we believed strength had to be proven through challenge after challenge. Instead, Every challenge revealed more about our own assumptions than about yours. Ethan answered with the same calm honesty that had guided him since the beginning. Sometimes people spend so much time looking for hidden motives that they stop believing simple kindness is real. Those words settled over the gathering more heavily than any formal declaration. I recorded every syllable because I knew future generations would ask when the thinking of our alliance truly began to change. It was not when Ethan defeated a royal champion. It was not when he solved an impossible strategic trial. It was the quiet moment when an entire council finally admitted that they had measured humanity with the wrong standards all along. As the evening sky darkened above the academy, students from dozens of civilizations gathered together without instruction, sharing meals, conversations, and laughter across the campus grounds. High Queen Seraphis watched the scene beside her granddaughter before quietly saying, "Today my people believe they were evaluating one human. In truth, one human has been teaching an entire galaxy how to become better neighbors. And for the first time since I began serving as Royal Archivist, I realized the greatest human victories would never be remembered because they conquered worlds. They would be remembered because they quietly transformed the hearts of those who believed they could never change." Several months passed after the extraordinary gathering at the Grand Stellar Academy, and the changes continued spreading across the Alliance in ways no royal decree could ever have accomplished. High Queen Seraphis had not ordered new policies. The Royal Council had not issued mandatory reforms. Instead, countless students, teachers, diplomats, and explorers simply began treating one another differently because they had witnessed what one ordinary human had done without seeking recognition. Every incoming class at the academy now began its first morning with a shared meal among strangers. Empty tables slowly disappeared from the cafeteria because no newcomer was left sitting alone unless that was their own choice. I watched the tradition grow from my archive chamber with quiet amazement, realizing that the most enduring revolutions rarely announced themselves with ceremonies. They simply became habits repeated by ordinary people. Ethan Walker seemed almost completely unaware of the influence he had created. He returned to his engineering courses, spent long evenings in the academy library, and occasionally helped younger students solve difficult assignments beneath the old crystal trees overlooking the central courtyard. Princess Lyra often joined those study sessions without the large royal escort that had once surrounded her every movement. She laughed more freely now, asked endless questions about Earth, and even convinced several classmates to celebrate human traditions during academy festivals. Students who had once avoided her because of her royal status now competed for the opportunity to work beside her during research projects. High Queen Seraphis quietly observed these changes during an unannounced visit several weeks later. This time she arrived with only 2 attendants instead of an entire ceremonial fleet. Walking through the academy gardens, she paused beneath a flowering tree where Ethan was patiently explaining a complex engineering principle to first-year students using nothing more than fallen leaves, small stones, and simple sketches drawn in the soil. The lesson ended with smiling faces instead of confused expressions. After the younger students departed, the queen approached him. "You continue teaching," she said softly. Ethan smiled. "I was only helping them prepare for an exam." The queen looked toward the empty courtyard where laughter still echoed between the buildings. "That is exactly what I mean. You always believe you are only helping one person at a time." Ethan shrugged modestly. "Most problems become easier when someone does not face them alone." The queen remained silent for several moments before revealing something she had never shared publicly. When Lyra first entered this academy, every advisor warned her never to trust easily. They feared kindness would be mistaken for weakness. She watched her granddaughter talking happily with friends across the gardens before continuing. "You prove that genuine kindness can become the greatest source of strength." Ethan quietly followed her gaze. She was never weak. She was simply lonely. Those words carried more weight than any formal speech delivered before the Royal Council. High Queen Seraphis slowly nodded. "Our civilization spent generations teaching future rulers how to command loyalty. You reminded my granddaughter that earning friendship is even more valuable." As the afternoon sun illuminated students from dozens of worlds sharing ideas, meals, and laughter throughout the academy, I finally understood why humanity remained impossible to predict. Other civilizations built influence through authority, wealth, technology, or tradition. Humans often transformed entire societies through ordinary moments so small that everyone else ignored them until those moments became impossible to forget. Looking across the campus, I realized the greatest monument to Ethan Walker would never be a statue, a title, or a royal honor. It would be the simple sight of strangers choosing to sit together every single day because one quiet human had once believed that no child, no matter how powerful or unknown, should ever have to eat lunch alone. Many years have passed since that unforgettable day at the Grand Stellar Academy, yet every new generation still gathers beneath the same crystal dome before attending its first class. They expect to hear stories about legendary admirals, famous rulers, or brilliant scientists whose names reshaped the galaxy. Instead, I begin with the quiet account of one ordinary human carrying a lunch tray. I am Archivist Sorrel, and among every record preserved within these halls, none has influenced more lives than the story of Ethan Walker and the lonely princess who simply needed someone willing to sit beside her. Time transformed both of them. Princess Lyra eventually accepted the responsibilities of the throne and became Queen Lyra, admired across the Alliance for leading with compassion before authority. Whenever young governors asked how she earned the trust of so many different civilizations, she never spoke about royal ceremonies or political victories. She always smiled gently before answering. Leadership begins when someone feels safe enough to be themselves beside you. Those words were later engraved above the entrance to the Royal Council chamber, where every future leader now pauses before taking the oath of service. Ethan Walker returned to Earth after completing his studies, declining every title, honor, and permanent position offered by the Alliance. Journalists, historians, and ambassadors visited him countless times, hoping to discover the secret behind the afternoon that changed galactic history. They expected a complicated philosophy or a carefully planned strategy. Ethan always disappointed them with the same simple answer. She looked lonely, and I had enough food for two. Many listeners laughed the first time they heard those words. None of them laughed after learning everything that followed. Across the Alliance, the tradition that began at the Academy spread farther than anyone imagined. Schools, universities, diplomatic academies, research stations, and even government assemblies introduced shared meals for newcomers so that no visitor would begin their journey feeling invisible. Historians eventually argued over which political agreement officially began the Great Age of Cooperation. I quietly disagreed with every one of them because I knew the truth preserved inside our archives. Peace did not begin with signatures placed upon official documents. It began when one human noticed something every important person in the room had overlooked. They saw a future queen. He saw a child eating alone. Visitors still travel across countless light years to stand before the preserved cafeteria table displayed beneath crystal glass in the Academy Museum. At first, they always appear confused because it looks so ordinary. Then they hear the story. By the time they leave, they no longer see furniture. They see the place where an entire civilization learned that greatness could begin with the smallest act of kindness. Whenever students ask me why humans became so respected throughout the Alliance, I never mention their technology, their resilience, or the remarkable adaptability that once fascinated our scholars. Those qualities are impressive, but they are not the reason humanity changed the galaxy. Humanity changed the galaxy because ordinary humans repeatedly chose compassion before status, understanding before judgment, and friendship before advantage. That lesson outlived fleets, governments, and generations. It continues every time a stranger is welcomed instead of ignored. Looking back across all the centuries recorded within my archives, I have reached one conclusion that no longer feels like opinion, but simple historical fact. We once believed humans would become extraordinary because of the battles they could win. We were completely wrong. Humans became unforgettable because they won the battles that no one else even realized were worth fighting. And in doing so, they quietly taught the rest of us what true greatness had always looked like.